want to talk generally as an introduction to a thing I'm going to do for the next few weeks, which is loosely the history of wargaming, but also the history of my wargaming, and give you a chance to see some of the things I still wargame with that I wargame with back in the day. So today, I don't want it to be dry, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I could go 18th century Germany, Fredo was making lead figures, and then Britons in the 19th century, and blah, blah, blah. I don't want it to be too dull, so I'm going to skip over bits because this is an overall picture. And if anyone wants a more in-depth picture, you can ask me, or maybe it'll come about in other videos later on when I look specifically at different companies or different genre. So today I'm just going to do a general overall impression of the history of wargaming from where it started to where we are now. So where it started, as I say, 18th century, our company in Germany certainly was making lead figures, and a bit toy soldiers. There have been model soldiers around for years, haven't they? But specifically for games, the first official war game was developed by Prussian officers in the 19th century, called Kriegsspiel. Now, Kriegsspiel is a sort of a style of gaming for those of you who don't know. So you can have any map you like, and it's split up into terrain areas which are worth a certain distance. You have two armies, and the idea of the game is to be as realistic as possible. So the umpire knows the rules backwards, so the umpire is vital. And then you have two groups, maybe four aside, of Prussian army officers in the original day, and they would fight, they'd write everything down and pass it to the umpire. The players wouldn't touch the figures, or little blocks they were, or little lead pieces. But you would say, oh, I want my cavalry to move over there, please, and then he'd interpret what you'd written down. And if you wrote it down wrong, they went the wrong way. And it was a training aid for sort of 19th century officers. Now, the next big development is the 1920s to the 1950s. You start to get lead figures. So I'm looking at things Britain's in the UK. And I know there's others, but in the UK they tend to be Britons. Some of my Wild West figures were my dad's, and they're Britons. And if you look in, you go to sort of junk shops, antique shops, you can still find these old figures and flats and things. And they're interesting. I suppose if you had enough, you could have a war game with them. They're still figures, aren't they? They are interesting. They're not a standardised scale. They tend to be on the larger side. Well, I would call them more 54 mil personally, but there wasn't a standardised size for these things. Britons then begin to start making specific, how can I describe it? I want to say genres. Well, I feel like I've said genres a lot. I need to find a better pair of glasses because I can't see you. But, yeah, Britain's. So you start to get like regiments and cavalry, and then after Britain's, there was a company called Elastian that I'd never heard of. But I will have a look at them, do a bit of research, and finally, after all of those things, you end up with Airfix. And this is all into the 60s now. And then in sort of early 60s, that's when I started wargaming, 62, 63, I'm playing with Airfix soldiers. That's my introduction. So I'm there at that sort of beginning. The actual metal figures that we now recognise and wargame with, and if I reach over here, I can show you a chap there that I still wargame with. Now he is from the very first ever official, now official I say carefully, fantasy range by Miniature Figurines in Southampton. Now the reason why they were official was they had a license from the Tolkien estate to make figures for the Middle-earth game. Some are a bit odd. If you look at Gollum, or like the Barrow-wights, they're not what he becomes later on. Gollum's like a big frog with big boggly eyes. He's about that big. And the troll's a little teeny weeny, well, there's a marsh troll, he's a little teeny weeny chap. I've got one somewhere. And the ordinary proper troll is less than an elf. Well, no, he's bigger than an elf, but he's about the same size as it was like a stocky human with a pudding bowl haircut. Funny looking chap and a big club. But they were under license. That's the point. They were proper miniature figurines. Now they come about in late 60s, early 70s. Wargames clubs had come about before that, and in the UK we generally attribute that to Donald Featherstone and his books. That's how I read Donald Featherstone books. I met Donald Featherstone at a show. You know, he was sort of the guru of British wargames clubs, wargame societies. That's really where it comes about. And let's say early 60s. I started wargaming formally at a club in 72. So about 10 years after this phenomena had started. And in my experience, you could get historical figures were quite good. There were a lot of companies making historical figures. We specialised with Hinchcliffe and miniature figurines, but there were others. So the first two people who come in to make fantasy games in America, it's a chap called Scrooby. Is it John or Jack? I should get his name right, really. I wrote it down. Bear with. Where is he? Jack Scrooby. So Jack Scrooby had a toy shop. I'm going to do a section on Jack because it's fascinating. I think we need to know about him. And he made his own figures and he sold them in his own toy shop. He didn't die that long ago. So we're talking my generation, or certainly like my dad's generation. And then in the UK we had, as I say, Donald Featherstone, and we had Bill Lamming up in Hull. We had the miniature figurines guys, we had Hinchcliffe guys, and then that's like, for me that was like 72, 73, and I was doing that. Now when I went to college in 75, when I was 18, that's the year that we first started to hear in the UK about Dungeons and Dragons. Gary Gygax had done some work on Dungeons and Dragons fantasy rules before that, and I think Dungeons and Dragons officially comes out in 74. And again, you're gonna have to bear with me because I've got some notes, because I want to get these people's names right. I think they deserve that. Tony Bath is the name of the other chap, but I'll be doing more on these people. This is just like instead of doing my normal Friday Night Live because my laptop's broke, this is my Friday night amble around history. So don't get giddy. So Dungeons and Dragons comes along. Then I played, I think I've mentioned this in a previous video, I played Sorcerer's Cave before I played Dungeons and Dragons. So obviously other fantasy games were around. But the Mystic Wood, which is the companion to the Sorcerer's Cave, is an Arthurian medieval story. Well, that's what it's based on. It's like Child Roland to the Dark Tower Kane sort of business. Search for the Grail. So when I finished college, I personally went back to historical games. I played Napoleonic games then for a long time. I have a photograph of the earliest photograph of me wargaming was in 1981, and we're playing 15mm Hinchcliffe Napoleonic with some kids who were in the first ever wargames club I ran as a teacher after school. So that, that's an interesting thing. But that's the earliest photographic evidence I've got of me wargaming. And we still occasionally use things like Airfix, painted them. A mate of mine at college had a sort of a British army of Airfix figures painted. And they could get buildings. I'm sure you got either Hougham Hall or Haysant. They did Sheriff of Nottingham's castle, didn't they? And you could get a Roman fort like the mile forts on Hadrian's Wall. But don't know what you think about them, but they made them. So I'm sure they made one for the Napoleonic Wars. Pretty sure they did. I had a lot of Airfix buildings that people use on model railway, like thatched roof, black and white, just holes where the windows were. They're dead easy to put together, which was just a bonus of them. Then in 79, that's like the next. So Dungeons and Dragons is sort of 74, and then we get Ral Partha and Grenadier, who start to make figures largely with licenses for Dungeons and Dragons. Miniature figurines made, let me find them, there here we go. They went on, from when they were doing Lord of the Rings, they went on to do these sorts of chaps. These are elves from what they called sword and sorcery, which to all intents and purposes was Dungeons and Dragons. But it was slightly more of a fantasy war game rather than Dungeons and Dragons roleplay. First White Dwarf I saw advertised. I've got the advert for it in a wargame magazine, and it's going to be early 70s. I'll dig that out as well, and I'll do pictures of that and an article. Because, that's definitely early 70s. So by the end of the 70s, 25mm has become the accepted, standardised scale. Well, obviously, people doing 15mm and they're doing them, but 25mm is, when I started wargaming in the 70s, 25mm is what you did. Nobody said to you, what scale are you doing? So I'm doing the Sudan. Great. Everyone knew it was 25mm. I mean, I had figures in the early 80s from companies like Dixon's. And it's surprising how many of the companies that were around then are still around now. Heroics and Ross and people. You can still see adverts back in the old days for those folk. And some of the odd fantasy games I'll have a run through, because there are some things that from the 70s that will surprise you when I tell you what was available back then. And I've got some sci-fi from the 70s as well, which are interesting. So we'll look at those at some point. Citadel officially appears in 79. Warhammer officially 83. So if you're building up a chronology, you've got Citadel and you've got Warhammer. And then after 83, you start to get the metal figures in blister packs. So before 83, just dates you, doesn't it? I was married in 79. When I got married in 1979, you could not buy a metal figure groups in blister packs. That's madness, isn't it? Crackers. So we got, Warhammer blister packs. 1990s, there's a burgeoning of game systems. A massive number of game systems start to appear after sort of 1990. You get card games, you get board games. massive things. I mean, there's always been random games. Because if you look back, I was saying about Kriegsspiel being the first game. Kriegsspiel comes along, 1820s. Then the sort of the big famous game after that is probably Diplomacy, which I played as a teenager. And I'm sure you can still get it. I don't play it at the moment, but I would if I could find it, or somebody gave it me. And then what came after? What did I think was come after that? I mean, I played Kingmaker. When I played Diplomacy in the early 70s, when I was at school, we played Kingmaker, Risk. I know Risk's not really a war game, is it? But, you know, who cares? I mean, if you go way back, chess and Go were war games. If you're looking for a historic definition of things, a genuine academic definition, well, you know, we don't go to clubs to play them, do we? Well, I don't. I'm just checking out. Yeah, so 90s, you get Perry's come along, the Perry twins, miniatures, model making. Model making takes a huge boost at that point, becomes incredibly skilled, beautiful things. Those models are pinnacle of modelling success. And, you know, chaps smoking cigarettes and every piece of equipment's right. If you compare that to what we were getting from Hinchcliffe and minifigs in the early 70s, well, you can't. There's not a patch on them. Then we have a sort of plastic explosion because they improve plastics. Like Airfix, they're all right. I've got lots of plastic Airfix soldiers in my World War II army, but they're a bit bendy. And the paint flakes off if you're not careful. But as they invented and came up with better plastics, that more figures came into being plastic. I've just got a load today somebody gave me. A load of plastic goblins. And they're great. I don't paint them. I just put them in my Dungeons and Dragons role play thing as counters, sort of figurative things I do. And after so you got the 90s, and then sort of 2000s, 2010 to the present day, 3D printing. And look what 3D printing's doing. It's amazing. And it's taken everything to a whole new level. I remember seeing people talking about the possibility of 3D printers in the future on programs like Tomorrow's World. And now they're here. I just got this. I've got to show you this. It's not really what we're talking about, but I've got to show you this. I ordered some stuff, as you do. And it was stuff I wanted. And I ordered it from Timu. And it's a stupid little game to play at the start with the cups and a P. And I kept winning because it was sort of doddle. And it kept saying, "You've got a free gift." And I thought, yeah, of course I have. So I got to the end and it said, "Choose your free gifts." So I chose them, as you do. Thinking, yeah, well, that's not going to happen, is it? You know, buy another 5,000 quids worth of stuff and we might send you one of them. And then I ordered some stands to put my phone on when I'm filming for you, because I love you and I care about you. And I saw my free gifts start to arrive. Look at this. That's a stand. Look at this. Got to get it the right way around. Look at this. This was free. It's mental. I'm going to keep going. Look at that. It's got to be glued together, but it's free. Look at this. Mind-numbing. I've got all bits. I've got fins and all manner of things. I've got a dragon. And we're talking about that pirate game we're going to play, set in the 1680s, off the coast of India. I've got loads of little ships. And I mean loads of little ships. Look at them. Bit of detail on them. I don't know where you can see them best. Down here against me dark jumper. But I haven't got one. I've got a bucket load. It says, prove I've got more than one. There's a few. 1, 2. And them goblins I was telling you about. Little placky goblins. Look. They're all right, they're money. Oh, that's free. Everything in that box were free. I know. I'm not asking too closely about why it were free. I don't care. My granddad always told me, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. It might spit on your head. So, I don't know why we went off on one there, didn't we? I know it's been a bit me trying to read all these facts because I didn't want to get people's names wrong. Do you know what I mean? They're important people in our world. And I'll try and do this better when I've got my computer. But I didn't want to sort of leave you hanging and not do anything because I'm sans computer now till sort of Tuesday, which you don't know, but it's about 4 or 5 days away. So I'm going to have to try and put all this together and work out thumbnails and oh God. And then they'll be rubbish, so I'll get no views and oh man, it's a waste of time. But anyway, for them of you who do look, you know what I'm going to say now. Ta-ra, Chuck.